All right, good evening. This is Matt Gross looking at a potential nor'easter scenario on Saturday, October 20th, 2018. That's what time it is. The nor'easter maybe around the 28th. But I'm just going to look at very, very quickly. Just going to run through some solutions and show you why the pattern is extremely volatile and why the ceiling of this event is very, 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 very high 8 days away, possibly a damaging storm. But the far, far more likely scenario is just a run-of-the-mill nor'easter. So I'm just going to very quickly go through the last 4 model runs, and by that I mean the last 2 GFSs and the last 2 European model runs, just to kind of show you what they're seeing. So this is the GFS as of the 12Z run here. This is as of this midday, late this morning. And this runs out. Watch the Gulf of Mexico, Florida region. That's where the stuff's going to start happening. I'm going to roll this forward. Low forms east of Florida here. See, there's a couple of lows trying to form. The one off east of Florida wins. This thing starts to take over. It jumps to the east, and then this other low tries to come in from the Great Lakes, but it's just a little bit too far away to merge or phase with and really pull this very, very powerful 972 millibar low in. So this low continues to strengthen down to 965, but it's just off the coast, and they kind of do a dance around each other, and this kind of slams into Atlantic Canada, the original low. But point is very, very strong storm here with the potential to be even stronger if it happened to phase with this one off the coast. So let's take a look at 18Z, right? So this is, again, energy off the southeast coast. This is a GFS again, same similar model run. This time it forms a little bit closer to the coast and tries to come up. But notice what happens here. This piece back here, instead of coming down in the Great Lakes, this tries to dive down towards the Tennessee Valley, out over Kentucky and Ohio. So what happens is this storm develops, kind of reaches its peak intensity right here, right off Delmarva, and then starts to lose some of its intensity because this low, which can't quite phase with it because it's a little bit too slow and too far to the south, ends up taking over, and then this tries to form its own storm that moves up the coast. So here you get 2 nor'easters, more typical nor'easters. This first one's actually pretty strong. This might, be a pretty big deal for Delmarva and southern New Jersey if it happened to evolve like this. But the bottom line is it doesn't reach its potential because the second low is a little bit behind it. We can see this if we go to the 500 millibar map here, which shows the energy up in the atmosphere, which is where these things are going to be created. And if you look here, this here is our original storm. This is the first one that formed off Delmarva in that solution. So it comes out over here, see it starts to develop. But notice the second piece is way back over here out of Missouri and Arkansas and Kansas and Oklahoma. This piece, if we went to the 12Z run, I don't want to get too confusing, would have been up here in the Great Lakes. That was that second low you saw in the other run where the storm stayed completely off the coast. But again, it just shows you that we don't really know where the second piece is going to be when it comes in. So this low forms here. It heads out to sea. The second low comes in. That tries to form a storm. So it just shows you could have 2 storms here. You could have 1 storm out to sea, or you could have them all phase together. Let's go to the European. And now this is where we want to jump into last night's European model run, because this is the one that's going to show everything almost coming together perfectly. So here we are, bunch of lows. Actually, no, this is today, so let's do last night's first. We'll do both of them eventually. But let me see. Here's last night's. So here's our low off Florida, starting to form. You see it's broad, so you got a large area here. This correlates between 1,002 and 998 millibars. So there's a broad area of low pressure. In this case, the western side of the low takes over, and then it starts to bomb, and so you finally get this incredibly powerful 952 millibar low off of southern New England, which, remember, Sandy bottomed out in the low 940s. So this is, maybe one step off of Sandy if you have this. Now, this is not likely to happen. It just shows you what can happen, and this is the extreme solution that everybody's going to pass around on social media today because it's, the most interesting one to look at. And if you correlate this now to the wind map, this is the wind gust from, again, this is last night's run. Look at these winds that come up on the east side. This correlates to 127 knots, gusting, not sustained, gust, but it doesn't really matter out at sea. But this, again, stays off the coast because it would be to the east of it and slams into Maine, the Gulf of Maine. This would be a major, major storm, one of the worst that Maine has probably ever seen. If it were to verify verbatim. It's not going to verify verbatim, or at least a 1 in 1,000 chance it will, because there is literally 100,000 different things that could happen in these scenarios. It's just too difficult to predict and nail down. So let's look at today. Now, the one thing I want to actually look at last night, one more thing. This is our storm here that comes in. So if we run this forward, all right, here is the initial storm off Florida. This is where it forms right here. Off Florida, you see this little like yellow and orange and red color. That's where the original storm forms. And it kind of, in fact, it actually takes the one further to the west of that. But this is the original energy where the storm forms. It actually takes the southern one. It shows you how volatile this is. It could be anywhere in that ball could form the storm. But eventually it starts to consolidate over here off the coast. And then this now, very, very well-defined circulation you see in the overall pattern, in the overall scope, and just bombs off of New England. But notice, this piece back over here did not completely phase into it. So you could have actually had a situation, if you had this storm was back over more towards New Jersey, like we saw with the second GFS run that I showed, the 18Z run today, and it phased into, oh my gosh, you would have had just a biblical solution if this phased into that. But that just shows you last night's European run isn't even quite the ceiling. It would be the worst case scenario for Maine, but it could actually get even worse than that for areas to the south and west. Again, possible, not likely. That just shows you the gamut, the spectrum of what could happen with this storm is incredibly, incredibly wide. So what about today? Okay, here's today. This is now the 12Z run. This is the latest European model run. It's going to show now, look at this, 3 lows. One in the Gulf, one on the east coast of Florida near Cape Canaveral, and then one already off the coast. And run this forward, what happens? 3 lows. All right, the middle one kind of takes over, then we run it forward. Up now, the western one's dead. The eastern one comes in stronger. The eastern one actually ends up winning out here. It looks like the middle one is going to win out originally, and then as you roll it forward, the eastern one wins out. So the eastern one wins out. What happens? Well, the low is further to the east, and there it goes out to sea, not really bothering anyone. Here's that energy over here to the west of New England, back out over the eastern Great Lakes coming in, and it's just too far away to pull this in. We can see this if we look at the 500 millibar map. And if we run this forward, here's the energy in the southeast, trying to form a low, tries to form it somewhere. We can actually see that the 3 lows very well. One piece here, one piece here, one piece back here. They all try to take over, but as the time goes on, you see this eastern energy takes over, and the low ends up forming out over there. Notice this piece is very robust, even more so than last night. It would have been really interesting if we had this piece in last night's run with the big storm out over here, because this comes crashing in. I mean, this is just a ton of energy coming crashing in. If it can top. Now, one thing you're noticing here, and are probably noticing, is that most of these runs, the initial piece is running away from the area of low pressure. So I kind of wanted to look at, say, okay, what do we know here and what do we not know? And this is basically what I came up with. So first of all, the things that we know, pretty simple, right? Okay, what we know. Big ridge out west. That seems to be pretty clear. If you look at most of these model runs, what we're talking about is this area over here. Notice this big bulging ridge in the western United States that extends up into Alberta and Saskatchewan out here in Canada. Huge, huge ridge. See, this is on the current Euro run. This is the 12Z run. This is, last night we didn't have quite as much. See a big ridge here. It took a little bit longer to develop last night, but we still see it here. Huge ridge out in the western part of the United States up in Alberta, so it was there. And if we go to the GFS runs here, we can show it better on the 500 millibar map, right? If we look, see, big ridge out over here, see up over Montana, they don't have quite as much room into Canada here on these GFS maps that I've got out, but it still shows the same general thing. And then this is today's, let me run it forward, only hour 12, let me run it forward to the time of, we were looking for the storm out here. Here it starts forming again around day 8. GFS ridges are not quite as big as the European ridges, but notice, once this ridge takes over, here comes the energy, and ridge pops up. That causes this storm here to dive. This causes the 12Z run. It was even more pronounced in 18Z if you look at it, right? So this is much better ridge here in the GFS in 18Z, and in response, boom, that energy coming out from the trough is deeper and stronger, which leads us into our second point here. In response to that ridge, we'll have a big trough coming into the east. And the strength of that trough, how deep the trough is, all of that is going to depend on how big the ridge is. But that clearly seems to be happening around day 7 to day 8, where the big ridge forms out west, trough comes down in response to it. And as we've already been talking about, number 3, there's likely to be a low of some sort off the southeast coast before that energy comes around. Now, if you've been following storms long enough, you'll know that just the fact that you have a trough coming in that has the chance to be negatively tilted, that alone would create the potential for a nor'easter, a typical nor'easter with wind, rain, raw air, cold, that, just typical bad weather, if there was not a low off the southeast to begin with. The fact that there is a low off the southeast to begin with potentially is what makes this so interesting. So that's what we know. There's probably going to be a storm of some sort around the 28th of October. It will probably not be ultra memorable. It'll probably just be bad weather. But there are chances that the ceiling could be much higher here, and that's what I want to get into here when we go into what we don't know. And what we don't know really revolves around the trough that's coming in and the low that's coming in behind it. So, timing of the trough. We don't know exactly what time that's going to correlate to the ridge. Orientation of the trough. That's whether it's negatively tilted or whether it's positively tilted or what it's doing. We saw 4 totally different scenarios of that just now. The amount of cold air with the trough. I don't want to get too much into this, but some of these model runs are showing very, very, very cold air coming in behind that trough, which leaves open the possibility in only the most extreme scenarios, I want to underline that, under only the most extreme scenarios, that if the southern low were to form and face with this trough, you could have snow and possibly big snow on the west side of this. Probably less than 5% chance of that happening, but it absolutely is in the cards if you get an extreme scenario. The strength of the trough, that's just how much energy. We talked about with the Euro, right, where one European model run had much more energy coming in with it behind it, even though the low was further east. But that's going to matter if it happens to try to phase with it. And then also if the trough will try to cut off. And what we mean by that, I'll try to bring up that GFS run. There's a good view right here. This would be the trough and the energy cutting off. So if you go back, you see here comes the energy to the south, and just because the ridge is so severe and it's able to kind of bottle up, this energy here ends up cutting off. This big circle you see is cutting off. So if it happens to cut off close enough to the low, that would help suck it in. If it's close enough and just cause a really, really big storm to occur. That happens usually after it's negatively tilted. So that's just what we're talking about there. That will also matter, but again, that's detail we really don't know. Now, regarding the low, where the southern low will initially try to form. Is it in the Gulf? Is it over eastern Florida? Is it over Florida itself? The exact location of where the low originally formed is going to matter because however far east or west it starts, it's probably going to end up more east or west at the end of it. Where the low will try to form, when the low will try to form, because obviously the earlier it tries to form, the further east it's going to end up, because if it forms earlier, it has more time to escape and get away to the east. That's, just simple why that matters. How strung out the energy will be when low forms. We've talked about this in the European model run. When I'll go back to that again if I can find it right away here with the 3 lows. So this is today's, today's showed it really well right here. You see, this is very, very strung out energy. 3 lows. It doesn't know where, the model doesn't know exactly where it wants to place the low. That's why we probably won't know for several days the details, why you're going to see dramatic swings in these models. Huge storm one run and then nothing. You're going to see some wild model runs this week just because the models don't know exactly where to place the low because the energy right now in the models is strung out. Is this in reality, or is this just because the models don't know exactly where to place the low? Could go either way, but it really, really matters to our final solution. D, how quickly is the southern low going to be able to consolidate before the energy from the trough arrives? That matters because the stronger and more well-defined of a storm you have off the east coast and the energy comes in, the more you can have an extremely high-end solution. How far, how fast, or how far east does the low try to move initially? That matters, as we saw with some of the runs that we're out to sea, or some of them that stay west. A slower storm that consolidates faster further west will produce a more extreme solution, one that escapes east, and probably not that bad. Maybe you just get a run-of-the-mill nor'easter from the second low. And finally, I only think it's like a 5% chance, maybe 10% chance of this happening, but does the southern low have any tropical characteristics? That matters because one of them did. One of the models did, and I'm just going to show you what happened when we did this. And so this is just one of the ensembles. This is the Euro runs 50 times after it runs initially, and this is the ensemble. And notice here is off Florida. It tries to develop, and then it just explodes coming up when you have a defined tropical system coming up. Not likely, but boy oh boy, would this be crazy. All right, that's it for now. I'll probably try to do some video updates later this week, but everything's on the table, so happy model watching, and that's all for now.